The valet line outside the Grandview Hotel moved the way it always did on gala nights, a slow parade of German engineering and polished chrome. And Daniel Reyes stood near the back of it in a 15-year-old Ford pickup with 210,000 miles on it, a dent in the tailgate he had never bothered to fix, and a booster seat still buckled into the back because he had not had time to remove it after the school drop-off that morning. He was 42 years old, a single father of one, and he had come tonight not because he wanted to, but because his 6-year-old daughter Mia had spent 3 weeks making a poster for the charity auction's children's art wall, a lopsided painting of their 2-person family standing under a sun with too many rays. And he had promised her he would be there when it went up. He had put on the one suit he owned, the one from his wedding 12 years ago, a wedding that had ended with his wife walking out 4 years later and leaving him a daughter and a mortgage and not much else, and he had driven his old truck across town to a hotel he could not otherwise afford to set foot in. The man ahead of him in the valet line was named Preston Calloway, and everyone at the gala seemed to know his name before he said it, the CEO of Calloway Automotive Group, a chain of 9 luxury dealerships spread across 3 states. A man who had built his fortune on the specific talent of making other men feel poor in his presence. Preston stepped out of a brand-new Bentley Continental, handed his keys to the valet with the casual disdain of a man who considered tipping optional, and turned around just as Daniel pulled his truck up to the curb behind him. Preston looked at the truck the way a man looks at something he has stepped in. He said, loud enough for the small cluster of arriving guests to hear, "You do know this is a black-tie fundraiser, not a farm auction." A few people laughed, the uncomfortable half-laugh of people who do not want to be seen enjoying cruelty but also do not want to be the one who objects to it. Daniel felt his face go hot. He said, "I'm here for the art auction. My daughter has a piece in it." Preston said, "Well, I hope the truck's not part of the exhibit." More laughter. Daniel handed his keys to the valet without another word, because he had learned a long time ago that men like Preston Calloway fed on reactions, and the only way to starve them was silence, and he walked into the gala with his jaw tight and his wedding day suit feeling suddenly, painfully thin against a room full of people who had never once had to choose between new brakes and a car payment. Inside, the ballroom glittered with the specific brightness of money trying to look like generosity. Chandeliers and string quartets and silent auction tables stacked with vacation packages and designer handbags, and along the far wall, exactly where the organizer had promised, hung 20 paintings by 20 children from the community center's after-school program, Mia's among them. A small bright square of sun and stick figures pinned beneath a card that read Mia Reyes, age 6, my family. Daniel found her painting and stood in front of it for a long moment, the sting of the valet line fading slightly against the sight of his daughter's careful, uneven brushstrokes. He did not know that Preston Calloway was standing 20 feet away, glass of champagne in hand, telling a small circle of investors a version of the valet story that had already grown crueler in the retelling, and he did not know that the gala's silent auction, the one raising money for the community center that ran Mia's after-school art program, was about to be interrupted by an announcement that would change the entire shape of the evening. The hotel's events director stepped onto the small stage at the front of the ballroom and tapped the microphone, and the room quieted the way rooms do when someone official is about to speak. She said, "Before we move to the live auction, I want to thank tonight's anonymous major sponsor, whose contribution is making it possible for the community center to double its after-school arts funding for the next 3 years. I've been asked to say a few words on his behalf since he generally prefers to stay out of the spotlight, but tonight he's agreed to say them himself." She looked toward the back of the room. She said, "Mr. Reyes, would you like to come up?" The room turned, in the particular slow ripple of 200 heads moving at once, toward the back wall where Daniel Reyes was standing in his old wedding suit next to his daughter's crayon-bright painting, looking as surprised as anyone. Preston Calloway's champagne glass stopped halfway to his mouth. Daniel walked to the stage in the kind of silence that has weight, and when he reached the microphone, he said, quietly. I wasn't planning on speaking tonight. I just came to see my daughter's painting. The events director said, Mr. Reyes owns Reyes Family Holdings, which many of you may not realize is the parent company that acquired the Callaway Automotive Group's real estate portfolio 18 months ago, including tonight's venue and, as of this past Monday, the Callaway dealership network itself, following the finalized sale. A murmur moved through the ballroom like wind through wheat. Preston Callaway had gone very still near the back of the crowd, his champagne glass now simply forgotten in his hand. What none of them knew, because Daniel had spent 14 years building it quietly, out of the public eye, was that Reyes Family Holdings had started with a single self-storage lot his father left him, expanded into commercial real estate through a series of decisions so unglamorous and methodical that no business journalist had ever thought to profile him, and had, 6 months earlier, closed on the acquisition of Callaway Automotive Group's underlying real estate, and in a final negotiation Daniel had handled personally, but quietly, through intermediaries. The dealership group's parent company itself, a deal that would not be publicly announced until the following Monday, but had, as of that past Monday, already closed. Daniel had driven his old truck to work every single day through 14 years of building that company, not because he could not afford something newer, but because the truck had been his father's. The last thing his father left him besides the storage lot, and because somewhere in the exhaustion of single fatherhood and 80-hour work weeks, he had simply never found a reason to care what the truck said about him to strangers. He looked out at the ballroom now, and he found Preston Callaway's face in the crowd. And he did not smile, and he did not gloat, because gloating had never been the point of anything he had built. He said into the microphone, I want to thank the community center for what they do for kids like my daughter. Art programs like this one gave her somewhere safe and joyful to go after school while I was working to build the company that just, as it turns out, became your new landlord's boss. A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the room, uncertain whether it was permitted to laugh yet. Daniel continued, I drove my dad's old truck here tonight because it still runs, and because my daughter likes the way the bench seat means she can sit right next to me instead of buckled 3 feet away, and because somewhere along the way I stopped needing a car to tell people who I am. I'd encourage everyone in this room to remember that the person you're least impressed by in a valet line might be the only reason there's still a company for you to work for on Monday morning. He stepped down from the stage without waiting for applause, though it came anyway, loud and sustained, and he walked directly back to his daughter's painting. Crouching down to her height even though she wasn't there to see it, just to look at it a moment longer, the too many Reyes' son. The 2 stick figures holding hands. Preston Callaway found him there 11 minutes later, his face gray in the particular way of a man doing fast, panicked arithmetic about his own employment. He said, Mr. Reyes, I had no idea. I would never have said what I said if I'd known who you. Daniel stood up and looked at him for a long moment. He said, That's exactly the problem, Preston. You only would have been decent to me if you'd known I was somebody. That's not decency. That's fear wearing a suit. Preston said nothing, because there was nothing to say that would not make it worse. Daniel said, I'm not going to fire you over a comment about my truck. Reyes Family Holdings doesn't run that way, and I'm not interested in becoming the kind of man who punishes people out of spite, because I've had enough of that kind of man in my life already. Preston, cautiously, said, Then what happens now? Daniel said, Now you go back to running your dealerships. And you think hard about how you talk to people you don't recognize. Because in my experience, Preston, that's the only test of character that actually matters. The one where nobody's watching and nobody stands to gain anything from your kindness. He turned back to his daughter's painting. The gala went on around them, the string quartet resuming. The silent auction bidding climbing steadily into the 6 figures. But Daniel Reyes stayed by the wall of children's paintings a while longer. And when Mia arrived 20 minutes later, dropped off by her aunt just in time to see her own painting hanging under the gallery lights, She ran straight past the chandeliers and the gowns and threw her arms around her father's legs. And he picked her up in his wedding day suit and pointed at the painting and said, "That's my favorite one in the whole room." She said, "Why does everybody keep looking at us?" He said, "Because sometimes, sweetheart, people forget that the ones who look like they have the least are usually the ones carrying the most." Outside, when the valet brought the old Ford truck back around, the dent still in the tailgate, the booster seat still buckled in back, Daniel lifted Mia into the passenger side himself. And as he pulled away from the curb past a line of gleaming cars that had cost more than most people's homes, he caught Preston Calloway's reflection in the side mirror, still standing near the entrance, watching the truck go. And for the first time all evening, Daniel let himself smile, not because he had won anything, but because his father's old truck had just driven his daughter home from a night she would remember for the rest of her life, and no amount of German engineering in that valet line could have done that instead.